It was Christmas Eve and I was a freshman in high school. My family has been split up for some time, so normally we trade off of Christmas Day and Christmas Eve every year. And this year, I had come home early from my grandparents' Christmas party, while everyone else was at my aunt and uncle's celebrating at another party. When I was dropped off, my cousins offered to stay with me for a few hours, yet I declined. I thought I could watch some of my new DVDs and get some alone time in the house, which is a rarity. I had noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street, but didn't think anything of it considering it was Christmas Eve. Probably a neighbor's relative or something. After I got inside, I locked the door, grabbed snacks, and started to settle down. I hadn't been home for more than 15 minutes when there was a knock on the door. I unlocked the door and opened it only a crack to see a man standing there. Dark hair, glasses, slightly overweight, and dressed casually. He didn't look like much of a threat, but my stomach dropped. He asked, "I was wondering about the car outside. Is it for sale?" I told him I didn't think so. "Is there someone here I can talk to about it?" I said, and quite stupidly I might add, "No, you can come back another time," and shut the door and turned the lock as fast as I possibly could. He reached for the handle immediately and started pounding on the door. I heard a string of profanities and the pounding stopped. Terrified, I was crawling on the floor to the phone, hoping he wouldn't be able to see me through one of the windows. Then I heard the noises. Our house had an open garage door, and it led through to the laundry room, where the door lock was broken and no one had bothered to fix it. Just then I heard a man yell, and I saw the man through the window run to his car and drive off. My uncle had gotten him just in time and scared the man off. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't made it home in time. Sadly, we didn't get the plate number, and nothing ever came of it. But I'll never be home alone on a holiday again. I would like to apologize in advance for any grammatical or spelling errors I make. This whole thing happened 2 years ago, about 2 weeks before Christmas. I would also like to apologize if anything is unclear. I am a 16-year-old female. Blub is 11 and Mo is 13. One night at around 11:30 p.m. during Christmas break, I'm sitting in my mama's room just talking to my sisters, Blub and Mo, and, of course, my mommy. Sitting together to talk is a usual thing for us. As we are wrapping up our conversations and saying our goodnights, my mom says she wants some water. Because it's important to the story, we don't keep water bottles in the house because when they're in there, my tweaker of a father likes to go for them. Wouldn't be a problem, but he usually takes a sip or two and then gets another bottle, even though the one he just grabbed is half full. It aggravates my mom, so she just keeps them in her truck. But anyways, she asks Mo and me to go outside and get her a few bottles. I grab the car keys and head outside. I get to our front gate and wave to Mo to come with me. The punk says she doesn't want to help carry some in because it's cold outside. Fuck it. I walk my happy self down the driveway and to my mom's vehicle. As I was walking down, I see a black figure standing in the middle of the street. I brush it off and just tell myself that the person is probably walking through to get somewhere. I grab the waters, but out of the corner of my eye, I can still see the person standing absolutely still. As I close the trunk and lock the car, I see him turn his head to stare at me. I was so creeped out. I ran up my driveway, slammed the gate, ran into my house, and locked the doors. I told my mom about the fucker, and she called my dad and asked him to see who was out there. My dad comes home about an hour later, and apparently that same person was still standing there and didn't leave until after my dad asked him how he was doing. 2 days later, my grandma asks me to take some money over to our neighbor's house. Our neighbor owns a meat locker, and we've got our tamale-making supplies from her, so we had to pay the bill. I'm in my comfy slippers, so I ask Mo and Blub to go do it. They agreed to go, but only if I stood outside the gate and watched them. The girls walk over to her front door and knock. She doesn't answer, so they stand there waiting for a couple minutes before they tried again. I noticed that, after they knocked the first time, the guy I'd seen standing in the middle of the street 2 nights before was walking up the street. I got an eerie feeling, and was hoping the neighbor would hurry. He was 2 houses away when she finally answered the door. The girls said goodbye to our neighbor, and proceeded to walk back to our house. They were up the driveway when the man was at the starting point of our neighbor's driveway. He was literally 10 steps away from the girls. He starts laughing, just this gross cackle of a laugh. The girls get creeped out and start to walk and run up the driveway. He picks up the pace, notices me standing at the gate, waiting for them, looks me in the eye, bites his lip, and starts whistling some creepy-ass tune. By now, the girls are inside the gate. The man starts walking up our driveway, still whistling, and I shake my head no, and he cackles again. He's about halfway up the driveway when my dad comes out. My dad hasn't taken notice of him yet, but the fucker sure saw him. He looked me straight in the eyes, this smirk on his face, and says, "You got lucky this time." He walks toward the sidewalk on the opposite side of my house and continues whistling. I was freaked the fuck out. I started to tear up. Of course, I told my dad about what happened right then and there. He was furious at the guy. He tried looking for him after, but couldn't find him. Later on that night, my dad sees the man walking down our street again. My dad approaches him and asks him what he's doing. The guy smirks at my dad and just walks away. My father reported the man to the police, but unfortunately when the police got there, the guy was long gone. The next day, my sisters and I see about 5 cop cars at another one of our neighbors' houses. We questioned it and told our dad about it. He's good friends with those neighbors. About an hour later, the police show up at our house. They were there to talk to us about the same man standing in the middle of the street, walking up my driveway, and all that. He had tried to kidnap and rape our neighbor's 10-year-old daughter. So, it turns out that the fucker had broken in through the little girl's, the neighbor's, bedroom window, tried to get the girl to take her clothes off, and when she screamed, he grabbed her by the hair and started hitting her. Her parents were in the backyard, but her older brother heard what was going on and told her parents to come inside. The little girl's dad tackled him and started beating him senseless. Meanwhile, the mother called the police. We live near a police station, so they made it to the house really fast. After questioning him, they found out that the man had debated on whether he should go after me or the little girl. The guy was a registered sex offender. He told the police that he had seen me walk home from school a few times but never got to do anything because I was always surrounded by friends. He made comments about how sexy I looked on the weekends when I came out in shorts and a tank top to throw out the trash. He told them that he'd even gone through our mail in hopes of finding out my name. He confessed that he was really interested in me. He confessed that he decided to go for the younger girl when he realized I would most likely put up a fight. After the cops talked to my parents and I, they asked me to leave the room so they could talk to my parents alone. I don't know what they talked about, but I spent the next few days bawling my eyes out. I was so scared to be at home. Even though the guy was in prison, I didn't feel safe in my home. I felt so disgusting and just... ugh. I was horrified at the thought of some creep thinking of me in such a disgusting way. I blamed myself for a while. A month later, I finally asked to see a therapist, and found that it really helped me. I am finally okay with talking about the whole thing. I consider myself to be very lucky. Last Christmas, I kicked it up a notch by lining my driveway with several long strings of colorfully obnoxious Christmas lights. Yep, I'm that neighbor, and my driveway resembled a landing strip. On many late-night arrivals, I was particularly thankful for that bright and happy landing strip. I lived in an older, established neighborhood in Baton Rouge that felt like it was carved out of a forest. Most of my neighbors were older and retired, with a few young families sprinkled in. One night, I was very surprised and annoyed to find my landing strip was gone. This seemed odd and very out of character for my quiet neighborhood, but I quickly blew it off after several days of fantasizing of some great revenge against these Scrooge-like hooligans that must have wandered over from a distant neighborhood. Late one night, just after Christmas, there was a knock at my front door. This was odd since I didn't get much front door traffic except for Halloween, and certainly not this late. I flipped on the porch light and opened the door. Apparently, my porch light was out, so the only available light was spilling out from behind me from my living room lamps. I quickly tapped the light a couple of times to see if I could get it to blink on, but nothing happened. Standing on my porch was an older man who stated, "I found your Christmas lights." Not knowing what to say, he added, "I was driving by one night and saw some kids take your Christmas lights from your driveway and run down the street with them. They stomped on them pretty badly, but I thought you might be able to fix them, so I grabbed them and threw them in my car if you want them." At that point, he took a step or two towards his car in my driveway, as if to lead the way, and I felt compelled to show some appreciation for his thoughts and efforts, so I naturally and automatically began to fall in behind him while exchanging small talk. You have to understand that the yards in my neighborhood were all close to 1 acre in size, so we all have large front yards and are well back from the road and other houses. That is why most folks here have long driveways. Secondly, there are giant oaks and numerous other large trees everywhere, so the streetlights are basically useless once you get off the street into people's driveways. I can't really explain just how dark my front yard was that night, except to say I could barely see the guy I was following to a car that I could not yet see. As we got closer to his car, I'm getting a really bad and odd feeling about the questions. And the questions in my head are trying to catch up with the pace of the events that are quickly occurring. He's returning my stolen or broken Christmas lights from a few weeks ago? About 3 feet from his car, he does something kind of odd. He stops and points at his car and says the lights are in the back. I had assumed that he would just open the door and hand me the lights. It seemed odd for me to open his car and dig around in his back seat. His car looked to be some kind of old Galaxy 500. An old man's car with 4 doors. I felt like this whole dealio was just getting more and more spooky, but now I feel kind of stuck. So I stepped towards his car and opened the back door. At this point, things and thoughts seem to accelerate, and the man steps in closer right behind me. So I am now basically pinned in between the open car door and the man. To my surprise and very great disappointment, no interior light comes on when I open the car door, so I remain in almost pitch-black darkness, with this stranger behind me, and a dark hole where I expect his rear seats to be. It's so dark that I quickly wonder if someone is sitting in the rear seats and about to pull me in while the older man slams the door shut behind me. By now, all of my survival senses are screaming and flashing, so I just blindly squat and reach into the floorboard of the car to feel around for these lights. My hand feels wires, so I immediately grab it and spin around past the man while frantically yanking and dragging these wires out of his car. I thank him profusely as I quickly stumble toward my front door. I yelled one final thank you, yanked the remaining tail of the lights in, and closed the door. The lights were an absolute mess and had clearly been cut in several places. I don't think there was even one salvageable bulb on the entire mutilated string. This was more than a stomping, and I wondered why he thought I might possibly be interested in this mess. I just felt relieved to be back inside, and thought the whole thing was bizarre, but shrugged it off and went to bed. The next morning, while recalling the night's bizarre events, I remembered that I needed to change my front porch light. When I went to change the bulb, I discovered that the light worked fine. The bulb had just become loose somehow. So I just screwed it tight again.